watching KUHS, the stream on Melody Drive, and this is the Weekend Boost. I am your host, Paul Lane, and I got to tell you, man, buckle up, people, because you're in for a ride. If you have a notebook, you're gonna want to get this out, because I'm going to give you a list of books that, if you haven't heard of these books, you have got to own at least one or more of these books. I just got a whole bunch of books in the mail and books that I got to get reading, but man, these are some serious books, so please, I'm going to get started right now. Get your notebook out, because you're going to want to get the names of these books. Yes. The first book, The Hate Next Door. You know what? I don't know about you, but I live next door to somebody who is very, very not friendly, if you know what I mean. This book is a great detailed explanation of what we're facing and what society has and what our neighbors look like. And some of them we like, some of them we trust, some of them we can't. So, really good book. I don't know if you've ever heard, I've talked about this many times on the show, Operation Paperclip. Did you know that after World War II, the United States hired all kinds of Nazis, war criminals, literally. Werner von Braun used to build the V-2 rockets that used to go and randomly kill people. Did you know that V-2 rocket was 42,000 pounds and it had a 2,000-pound warhead in the front of it? This book talks a lot about that and what Operation Paperclip did and how it affected the United States to this day. Top priority book that you must get. Howard Zinn wrote the book, A People's History of the United States. Guys, you need to understand what your country has done, what your country is capable of, and how your country needs to be held accountable in the days ahead, because this is a very, very true history of the United States that has effect on all of us to this day. This one I've just recently got, just yesterday, How to Overthrow the Government. This book was written some time back, but it's not a how-to book, but it's really a book to tell you about what this government has done to people and how they've gotten by with crimes and things that they should have never gotten by with. Another one that I'm telling you, this book was not only a page turner, but this book, The New Jim Crow. Guys, the Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow was a pejorative or a very destructive or hateful term that was used when they were back in the slave days, when they were holding back slaves from being free. And the system didn't end, it just changed, it just altered. And so the new Jim Crow talks about what's going on today. You know, why we have the highest population of incarcerated people, and why the largest percentage of those people are black and brown men. How did this come to be, and how is it perpetrated? Guys, you must have this book. You gotta get The New Jim Crow. Michelle Alexander, awesome author, very easy read, lot to read, lot to learn. I've talked about the Jakarta method before. Vincent Bevins wrote this book. The Jakarta method starts out in 1947 during the McCarthy era. You know what they did? They learned that they could create a boogeyman. And they used this technique to destroy the careers of people all over Hollywood. And they used this technique so effectively that they went to the country of Jakarta, which had the largest population of Muslims in the world, and they killed 1 million people without firing a shot using the boogeyman method. This book is a mind blower, man. Gotta get it. You gotta have it. And this last book is kind of just off topic, but this is one that just opened my eyes. I read it during my first wife's illness when she was dying of brain cancer. When Healing Becomes a Crime. Now, this book was written by Kenny Azubel, and it's really an eye-opener. It talks about the inception of the American Medical Association. It talks about how we cannot say today that this vitamin, this natural herbal remedy will treat, cure, or diagnose anything, and how the FDA got involved in it. Really, really got some good, useful information that I think that will open your eyes and really make you an informed consumer and an informed citizen. So that list of books, if you want to get those titles, reach out to me at the station. You can reach me at info@paullane.net, or you can get a hold of us at the station. Now, guys, you know that one of the things that I'd like to do, and I really love to do it, on the show, is I like to surround myself with people smarter than me. And we've had Isaac and Amari on the show a couple of times, at least once before. And these two gentlemen are not only knowledgeable and educated, but they're movers and shakers. These two gentlemen, I'm just going to read a little bit of their resumes. Abayuni, do you prefer Abayuni or Imari?
Imari is fine.
Okay, so Imari is a justice, equity, and inclusion consultant with decades of experience serving communities and collaborating with a variety of groups and institutions operating in the areas of mental health, child welfare, juvenile justice, and criminal justice. There's so much more that Imari has done. I mean, he's involved in throughout the state of Michigan and various social service groups and small businesses, academic institutions, including Grand Rapids Community College, Grand Valley State University, Aquinas College. There's just so much more. He works and navigates through issues of race, ethnicity, and gender with faculty students. So I mean, this is a gentleman who is absolutely making a difference and doing the things that really inspire me as a community activist and a community leader. And so, Amari, welcome.
Thank you.
Amari Dukes, and then Isaac Castales is a career educator with 24 years, including 21 years in Chicago Public Schools, principal of National Teachers Academy from 2012 to 2021. He led, listen to this, he led this school from the lowest possible rating at level 3 to the highest possible rating, level 1+. In 2018, Isaac helped his community defeat a city hall plan to close a school, the first time in the U.S. history where an injunction was granted in a school closing case based on a claim of racism. You know, when you see injustice, it's your responsibility as a citizen, guys, to stand up, to make your voice heard, and to protest or make known that you do not approve of this. And if it means gathering your community and getting together, that's what you got to do. And so together, these two gentlemen have an organization called 360 Collective. If you're on Facebook, look it up. Find out about community activism. Find out about community gatherings and collective voices. And that's the only way we're going to make our voice heard, is if we do it collectively. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Welcome. Greetings.
Thank you.
Peace and greetings, Paul. It's wonderful to be with you. Thank you, as always, for having us. It's always our pleasure when we can connect and talk about current events and what's happening in the world. So thrilled to be with you once again.
Yes, thank you. Guys, today I had trouble coming up with a topic of this, so I decided to name this "The House is on Fire." You know, we are in an existential crisis right now. We're in not just a national crisis, we're in a global crisis. There are countries all over the world up in arms and ready to defend themselves against the exploits of this current government. You know, the country of Greenland, I don't know if DJT is doing this to just harass or just to stress him out, but you know, he's going over there and continually threatening to go and take over the country of Greenland. You know, even sent his vice president over there yesterday, and you know, just starting with that, I just we're going to take it from there, and you know, please, what are your thoughts on all of this Greenland and, you know, take over Canada and Greenland, and you know, what is this about? Is this a distraction, or what is this?
I think, first of all, we got to look at what it really is on the surface. QMI is imperialism, right? Both these talking about Canada and Greenland have been under somebody else's rule for a long time. Even though Canada is not under British rule as much like it used to be, but both countries are being controlled by somebody else. So it's funny to realize that Denmark is controlling Greenland. It's so, I mean, so that's just the nature of white supremacy or how imperialism works. One country wants to take over another country for whatever reason. It's just rich for America to sit back and say what one country is doing when there's empirical knowledge to state that one country has America, or the country Denmark is doing just has done enough, or even more enough than what America has done for Greenland.
Absolutely. You know, there's a lot of speculation that there's precious minerals on Greenland, and there's ulterior motives involved in this, and I'm kind of the school of thought that this makes a lot of sense, and this makes actually more sense than any security or any other reason that they're giving for this, that they just want to get these natural resources. There's a lot of speculation that this has a connection to Elon Musk because the Teslas require a lot of precious minerals, and they're exploiting the people in Congo right now, and they've actually created slavery conditions there, and there's no way that they can make the Tesla any cheaper, any more affordable, so they have to go to another source and exploit that. And so there's a lot of people that believe that this has to do with that. And same with the Ukraine, I guess. Ukraine has a lot of cobalt and a lot of precious minerals that are very desirable. And I don't know. It just seems like every time we start talking about Donald Trump, the name Elon Musk keeps creeping in, and so.
I think always, because keep in mind this new tariff is taking effect in a couple of weeks. The Tesla is one of the cars that's going to be importing the least amount of things from all other countries. Tesla is made to produce 100% almost in the United States, so it's going to be affecting the least out of all the countries in the United States. So that's the big benefit for those who want Teslas. They should not see a price increase. If you want to buy a Ford or a GM car.
That's interesting. That's a very interesting observation. I didn't realize that they were completely made, almost completely made in the United States. Made. So there's definitely some. I had to call it underhanded bidding in this whole operation because, we all have seen the Tesla stocks dropping all over the world. It's 60%, even 70% drop in some countries in Europe. And the car's not selling. I know of someone who owns a Tesla right now, and he's upside down in it. And he wants to put a bumper sticker that says, "I bought this before Elon Musk became president." And so I think that he's just desperately trying to save his dying company. And so that was just one of my observations in that whole thing. But the imperialism part is absolutely indicative of what we've seen in this country. In years past, in the decades and centuries before, we could talk about Hawaii to the Dominican Republic. We could talk about Puerto Rico. There's country after country that was sovereign and is now part of the imperial United States. So makes perfect sense.
Paul. To that point, there isn't a country in the Western Hemisphere, in what we call the Americas, where the United States hasn't intervened in some way, shape, or form, either overtly through some stated military action or through some secret means of regime change and such. So I think what is happening in Greenland could be an expression of that. However, I think that it is new in some ways, in that at this point, I think what Trump is trying to do is to accelerate the division of the world into three spheres. One dominated by the U.S., one by Russia, and then another by China. Because as Amari stated earlier, Greenland is connected to Denmark. And so by getting everyone in Greenland and Denmark and the EU all nervous and worked up about what the U.S. might do in that region, Trump is destabilizing the European Union. Even his approach to what's happening in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, all of it is an attempt to destabilize Europe, to put Europe back on its heels, and to elevate the station of Putin and his oligarchy in the world and in the East, right alongside China. And then, of course, as you've stated, as we all understand, Trump is simply a figurehead for oligarchs like Musk and the Uhlines, and there's a host of others that we could talk about if we wanted to. But his goal, Trump's goal, is not to control the world. It is simply to enhance the oligarchy's control of this sphere of the North America, of South America, and to cooperate and collaborate with the likes of Putin and maybe to a lesser degree, those in China, because even though China is not in fact a communist country, it's more of a state organized, state run capitalism. there's still a connection, I think, between the power brokers in China and those in Russia, and then of course those here in the U.S.
Ah, very interesting. Very interesting. You know, you talked about destabilization of countries, and I hope you don't mind. We're going to talk. You know, we just kind of bounce around. We have so many things to talk about, but in the Jakarta method, they talk about that exact same thing. How they figured out a way to put together a formula that could literally go in and destabilize a country, and they went into 12 Latin American countries, and they did this whole cut and paste theory where they destabilized and installed dictatorships, and they put authoritarian governments in place. And not only did they destabilize these countries, but they brought in the Contra, and they developed the Sandinistas, and the Contras developed their own war within, and it was an internal conflict that was artificially put there. And a lot of people don't realize this, but a lot of the people that are coming from Latin America are coming as a result of the destabilization that we did way back during Ronald Reagan. And so, you know, I'm really speaking to the people who are against immigrants and calling them illegal immigrants. There's no such thing as an illegal immigrant. You can call them undocumented. They're not illegal. The other thing is, these gentlemen, or these men who have been illegally arrested and taken to El Salvadorian prisons, they are calling them all terrorists, and they're calling them all criminals. And the fact of the matter is, the bulk of these men do not have any criminal record in the United States. Yesterday, Christy Noem went on, and they videotaped her standing in front of a bunch of men. And if you look closely at these men, every one of them has a tattoo, and every one of them looks like the exact same tattoo. And I'm wondering if that was our AI that they used to put these tattoos to make these men more nefarious looking, and to give them put the fear of the United States and give them the motivation to report anyone who's not here, who doesn't speak clear English, I guess is the simplest way to put it. So, you know, I don't know if that's a close-ended statement, but I'm seeing that this.
No, well, I like to say though, even let's say that every person there did have a tattoo.
Yes.
Right. That's still not illegal. There's still nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely.
They're, as a means of something being culturally cool. A lot of people around the world have tattoos on their bodies that they like, but it doesn't mean they agree with the larger context of what it is.
That's a great point.
So just because somebody has a tattoo, you say, oh, that tattoo means this. It doesn't mean that's why they got the tattoo. They just saw maybe someone having it. I like it, and let me place this on my body.
Yeah.
I mean, behind it. So just judging somebody based on that's the problem. That's one of the problems.
Dang.
So this is why due process is very important, and to figure out why did you. I mean, I'm saying that due process is fully going out the door, but it's very important to really. I mean, if you judge somebody or say somebody it's this, let's get down. Let's really find out if they are or not.
Great point. Due process. That is a given right. I mean, we all have the right to due process, and what is due process in a nutshell?
Are you asking us, Paul?
Yes, I'm sorry, yeah. So, well, how would you define due process? I mean, it's pretty simple, but.
Yeah, I mean, due process is the idea that if you're accused of a crime, that you have a right to A, hear the evidence against you, B, then to have an impartial party decide whether in fact you are guilty of the crimes that you have been accused of, and ideally the impartial party is someone who can relate to you, who is a peer of yours, and has the ability to think critically and fairly about the situation. That's in a nutshell what due process is, and I think where you're going with this is that lots and lots of people who have been taken out of the country and ripped from their homes have not experienced that process, and that I think is one indicator that, to your point earlier, Paul, that the house is in fact on fire, that we are entering a new stage of authoritarianism in this country that we cannot take lightly.
No, absolutely. Due process is I don't know if it's an inalienable right, but I know that every citizen, an undocumented person in this country, has a right to a fair trial. We have a right to a jury trial. We have a right to, like you say, in a jury of our peers. And when you can start doing that to these undocumented individuals, I mean that absolutely eliminates any rights that you have as a citizen, and they can abduct you with no due process, and they can take you incarcerate into any facility that they want without any responsibility or accountability. And this topic by itself, to me, in my opinion, is just, the house is on fire. We cannot accept this. There's a book, I don't know the author, but it's called On Tyranny. And it talks about, you don't just give up. You don't just lay down without, with some kind of protest. And it seems like that's what's happening here. And the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, nobody's standing up and saying, hey, we can't do this. And the ones that are, they're being silenced, or we're just not hearing them. I don't know. But that, in my opinion, is very, very critical to our safety, to our security as individuals, as Americans, and it is contrary to the Constitution of the United States.
I think Dukes was going to say something.
I think, Paul, I think the idea is for the house to burn. There's this thing with the old Malcolm X quote saying where, talk about the slave and the slave master, and the house is burning. And the slave master says, our house is burning, master. And the master is not more or less worried about it, because he understands that he can get a new house. But it was ironic for the slaves to sit back and say our. And I think that as you said, it's in this moment that we're realizing that some people are totally fine with the house burning, because if they're in a position to build a new house better than the old house.
Mm-hmm.
And those outside the house, we gotta realize is that are we holding on to a system that we never had grounds or any type of legitimacy in. I mean, I think right now they're really showing everything that our what we think we had as individuals or culture, whatever, as race or even individuals, we don't really have. So those things that we really thought that we had, that they pull them away easily, like layers of an onion, easily pull them away and building something totally new. And like you said, there's no pushback. There's no pushback, because I totally feel like, because this is where the majority of white males really want.
Yeah.
They're totally fine with taking these things away, because in their eyes, by pulling these things away might be a short-term hindrance, but the next step would be a bigger world, a better world for me and my children.
Mm-hmm.
So if those black and brown individuals may be hindered by the situation, that's totally fine, because I can only care about me at this point. That's how I was looking at it. I can only care about one. I can only care about white males at this very moment. And so with that being in mind, who's hurt by that is totally fine, because once the house is burned down, we're going to build a whole new house or a whole new reality.
Oh man, yes.
Yeah, and I think to add to that too, the notion that you brought up earlier, Paul, due process, like that's one of the cornerstones of a liberal social order. And like if we go back to the American Revolution and some of the founding principles of the American Revolution, the idea that a person is born with unalienable rights. Now, that's aside from the fact that who was defined as a person and wasn't in the 1770s only included white men in the first place, and property owning white men at that. But the notion of liberalism there was that there were unalienable rights, such as freedom of speech, the right to own property, the right to due process, and a number of other things. And so what we are seeing now in the MAGA cult is it is a reaction to liberalism, and it is an attempt to burn liberalism to the ground. So when we talk about burning to the ground, they're talking about the erosion of what we have considered to be in this country unalienable rights, or even more broadly than that, beyond civil rights, human rights. So they are antagonizing the idea of human rights, and they want to create, in place of liberalism, an authoritarianism that decides who is of value and who is of not, where there are no protections for children, a la the dismantling of the Department of Education and so forth, right? They want to privatize society in such a way that creates a broad gulf between people who look like me and are wealthy and everybody else. And so they are in the process now of destroying the liberal social order. And one of the things that Amari and I always talk about is the value of the liberal social order in the first place, and the need, in fact, to move beyond even liberalism into something that is even more humane,
yes,
that is even more just than liberalism, which has severe shortcomings that over time we have discovered. And this time, though, is imperative, because if we don't survive, then we can't even move towards something more just. We can't even advance and progress past liberalism, because we won't even have that, right? We will be forced to live under the yoke of an oppressive regime, and the likes of which we've never seen. It reminds me a lot of the 70s, Paul, when Nixon was elected, and his election was a reaction to some of the progress and upheaval of the 1960s, and the way that he went after activists and organizers. And I mean, the COINTELPRO efforts accelerated under Nixon, and I mean, you know as well as I do, maybe even better, Paul, what all that entailed. And so, like, we're there now, except we're several steps past that. Trump is not even a Nixon. He's not meeting with the Chinese. He wants to control the Chinese, right? Like, he's not trying to détente with people. He's past détente, right? There's something even more nefarious than that that's in play here, right? So this is definitely an inflection point, and I think it's incredibly important that people focus on survival pending social progress, right? The resistance now is trying to keep our houses from burning down. It's trying to keep people alive. It's trying to make sure that our children still have opportunities in their career pathways, and that there's still money for them to go to college or to a trade school, right? It's just trying to keep ourselves intact. And so the shift is very different, I think, than what we've seen in the past. And at the same time, it's very much the same. The struggle towards justice remains, regardless of who the president is. And that's a tangent. We can go into that maybe later on. But yeah, that's my reaction to what you mentioned before, Paul, about due process and such.
Ah, very good. You know, and the other
I have a question, Bob.
Yes.
Well, now, for me, I'm looking at exactly what this current administration is doing and the steps in which they're doing it. You feel in the ease of it, of the movements. Do you feel freedom of this, whether the different administrations should they have put some things in place for this protection? Because he's moving as if like all these things to be done. So they should have.
Oh, I think we lost him, Paul. But I think his question was about how quickly and easily MAGA seems to be moving, as opposed to how challenging progress has been in the past, or things that maybe should have been put in place to prevent this sort of authoritarian takeover. Is that, I was paraphrasing for you, Amari.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry. Yep, exactly.
So yeah, what do you
Exactly.
think about that, Paul?
Um, I kind of think that there's so much fuel being added to this fire, and there's so much momentum gained because the group of people that are opposed to the liberal thinking and liberal mentality have this thinking that, yeah, the house is on fire, but my house isn't on fire. And they've excluded themselves. They've essentially put themselves in a place where they believe they're actually insulated from this, and they've been convinced that they are that the oligarchs are on their side. I don't know if that makes sense, but they really have this thought that, this doesn't affect me. I'm a part of this conservative takeover, and Project 2025 has dictated that and made preparations for that, and so I have every right to be a part of this. And I don't know if that answered your question, Marty.
Yeah, Paul. But keep in mind that there's a segment of society that don't want black and brown people to have some things, and so
Absolutely.
they're willing to make sacrifices in order for the benefit of their grandchildren or next generation. If I cannot have, um, I'd rather them not have it. I'd rather black people, brown people not have some things. If that means taking some things away from me, so they don't have it, then totally okay with that.
Mm.
Even though, like I said before, it's voting against their own interests, but they believe so much in um in the president, they identify with them so much. They see him. It's the same thing that happened with slavery and slavery with the with the I can't think of the word of it now. That's not the God, Paul. I'm losing my words here, Paul.
Black codes?
Yes, yes. And so even though he was just a step above a slave, he still identified with the slave master.
Mm-hmm.
As long as I'm not, as long as I'm not the enslaved person, it's totally fine. It's totally fine.
Oh
Right.
man. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also too, Amari, there's an element here of the people that we're talking about, like for now, are benefiting in this way. For example, like the dismantling of the Department of Education.
Mm.
I don't know if you both got to watch, but he set up a fake classroom in the White House. He
No.
didn't even go to a real school. He set up a fake classroom in the White House, and he had kids sitting at desks. And as he was signing the executive order, kids were also signing the executive order.
Yes,
So,
you can.
yeah, but the people that were there to watch him do that were proponents of like universal vouchers and and the notion of the voucher system, which would enable a family to take public funds to pay for their child's private school religious education.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look at the people that were in the room and how they move and shake within the world of education, those are the people who are going to benefit from the dismantling of the Department of Education, because the federal funds that have gone to strengthen rural schools, to protect students with diverse learning needs, to fill funding gaps in urban school districts like mine, like Chicago, right? That money is going to be given to states, and the states will be able to fund voucher programs if they want. And so places that are moving towards that, like Indiana, will have more money to advance and empower voucher programs. And that sounds good and that feels good now
On theory.
for a couple of years or 5 years or maybe even a little longer. But over time, the quality of public education in the state will deteriorate such that the state's economy grinds to a halt. And so, I mean, even if you look at Indiana now, since they've embraced some of these policies in just the short term, you can see drastic changes to the quality of student achievement there, and students graduating from college and moving into the workforce, being ready to contribute and what have you, right? So there are even some short-term indicators that these more stringent streamlined, bigger, bolder voucher programs don't work. But now, with the acceleration of that, by the dismantling of the Department of Education, and half of the people who have been fired are the people who help to fund those programs, who capture data, who track data, and help to siphon funds to the neediest places in our country. Without them, the department won't be able to get that money to people, and so that's going to grind things to a halt, even if the Department of Education continues to exist in some skeletal fashion, because it does require congressional approval. Trump has found a way to gut the department and all that it does, even if the Department of Education, in fact, still exists. So I think long term, I agree with what you're saying, Amari. Like, the results will be bad for rural white people who don't have a whole lot of money, who need support of some kind. But for now, I think they're all applauding and they're all cheering because they think that it will help them in the short term, and maybe it will, but in the long term, it is going to exacerbate conditions in this country that I think will lead, hopefully, to something more progressive and more revolutionary. But for now, I think we're in this like survival pending revolution state that we all have to be mindful of and nimble in responding to.
Yeah, I think this is a time that requires not just flexibility, but creativity and unity more than anything else, and there's a Turkish proverb that says how the trees love the axe because its handle was made of wood. And
right on.
I see these people, women in particular, especially, who are voting against their own interests day after day after day, and don't realize that you're voting against your daughters, you're voting against your granddaughters, you're voting against your sisters and your mothers, and this is going to have long-term, just like the education, it's going to have long-term detrimental effects that they're going to be very difficult to recover from. And so I think that's such an important reason to have guys like you on the show, because these topics are not just informative, but they hopefully light a fire under some people today that are listening. And hey, talking about lighting a fire, talk about the general strike. Let's just briefly, let's talk on that. Just I know that you're very involved. You introduced me today, and I spoke to them the other day, and that was a wonderful experience. But there's some things happening behind the scenes that you guys need to be aware of, and one of them is the general strike that's coming up. I believe April 4th.
Right, Paul. So the General Strike is an organization that is founded on the principle that real mass movement, real dramatic change, and I dare say liberation, begins when we can reach a critical mass of people in this country who are committed to withholding their labor. And so the General Strike U.S. movement is built on a set of research from a political scientist, Erica Chenoweth, who has analyzed movements all over the world, progressive movements all over the world, and what she found was that the most effective movements tend to be nonviolent movements in which at least 3.5% of the population is participating and engaged. And so in this country, that's around 11 million people. And so the General Strike US is a movement to try to get people committed to the idea of withholding their labor once we reach the critical mass of 3.5% of the population signed on. It is a very flexible, nimble movement. I'm helping to organize a chapter. I'm actually more supporting than actually engaged in the work. There are some other folks that I'm working with who are leading the work, and I'm trying to support it as much as I can here in Illinois. But there are chapters being organized all over the country, and each of those chapters is responding to the need in their communities as those needs arise. So in some places, General Strike US is organizing food banks. And one of the things that General Strike is now promoting is this notion of the time bank. And so that's one of the things that organizers and activists within General Strike are doing now. But the idea, though, is that we have to begin working together, as you're saying, Paul. We have to address common needs in our communities. We need to start forming trusted bonds with one another, forming rapport, getting into our communities and getting to know people, and figuring out how we can be of mutual aid. I want to stress that word, of mutual aid to one another. And as we begin to organize, we can then begin talking about our political aims and our goals and things of that nature. But that only comes through political education. This stage of what General Strike US is trying to do is more about mutual aid and cooperation.
Yes.
Which are things that you've highlighted, Paul, in our conversations previously. So I'm glad that you brought it up, and I'm glad that you're in contact with Day.
Yes. So I'm just going to kind of tell you guys, and I've mentioned this on the show before. Here's a few things that I've been doing to make my voice heard, or should I say, silence their voice. I have eliminated all meta platforms. I don't have Facebook, I don't have Instagram, I don't have WhatsApp, and especially Messenger. When I looked at the terms of service Messenger put out at the first of the year, I deleted them. I had a pretty good following on Facebook, and I had a lot of friends on Facebook, family members that I stay in touch with that I'd lost contact with over the years. But my principle is much more important than those contacts right now. I don't have X on my platforms at any. I've eliminated Amazon Prime. I do not have it anymore. We are in the process of changing our phones over to consumer cellular from Xfinity. We don't go to any fast food restaurants, none. We don't go to chain restaurants. We have keeping our money local. We're only going to mom and pop shops, and we found some fantastic restaurants. We only go to the secondhand store for clothes. Look at this outfit, man. I got it all secondhand, less than 20 bucks. But guys, there's so many things you can do. Do not participate. Here's what I think. These oligarchs are greedy. They are so greedy that they want to fight for every quarter. So when I can take them and keep one quarter out of their pockets, more power to me. You know what? By myself, that's nothing. But if we get 3 million or 11 million people to join in this, guess what? Mark Zuckerberg he desperately needs that money. He's so damn greedy, he needs every quarter he can get. Jeff Bezos, he has billions, and I know they're insulated. I know we're never going to make them go broke, but you know what? I'll never buy a Tesla. I canceled a contract with with the solar company because their battery was a Tesla battery. And I said, no, I refuse. I don't want Tesla products in my house or near me. It's a matter of principle. And when we start doing that, our voice is going to become a force. It's not just going to be a silent voice in the wilderness. It's going to be a force that must be reckoned with. There's so much more.
Yeah, I agree, Paul, and I think that there was a strike last month that was organized by a group called the People's Union. I believe that was just one person. Now, the General Strike organization did support that, but it did not organize that. So the General Strike is going to support other movements and other people that share ideas, share ideology, share practice. One of the things that I love so much about Day and others that I've met in the General Strike is the idea of cooperation, as you've highlighted, Paul. One of the things that I still see in conversations that I have in person and some even online and everything on our platforms, there are a lot of liberal people who want to blame those who voted third party, right, for Trump's election win. And then there are others on the left who say, well, the candidate that the Democrats ran supported and activated and sanctioned genocide.
Yes.
How could a person vote for a Democratic candidate that supports Israel and its treatment of Palestinian people, right? And that's created a blame game between leftists and Democrats. And I differentiate between the two because there are very few leftists left in the Democratic Party. But those two groups of people cannot afford to fight one another. Right?
Absolutely.
Because one of the things that MAGA and everyone else, if we look at their movement, virtually everybody in the Republican Party is coalescing behind Donald Trump. I mean, there is no resistance in the Republican Party to what Donald Trump is doing, and that's because they've coalesced behind an ideology. Even though many of the Republicans who support Trump now would never have supported a Democratic president or even a Republican president 20 years ago who was doing the things that Trump is doing now, right?
Yep.
But they've coalesced. And so it's important, I think, when people begin, even people who voted for Trump, when they realize that they've been had, that they've been duped, it's important for people like you and me, Paul, not to wave our fingers at them and say, I told you so.
Thank you.
It's important for us to welcome them in to a cooperative movement, something based on mutual aid, on understanding, on community, right? Because finger wagging, I mean, on our Facebook page, Paul, I mean, we've been called all sorts of things. I mean, when we talked about when our ideology was, listen, it's important that a person vote. If you want to vote for Kamala Harris and you feel like that's what you need to do, we support you. If you want to vote third party and you feel like that, we support you. But you must get out and vote. You have to activate. You have to leverage your vote, because it's one of the things that you can do. It's not the only thing. It's one of the things that you can do. And I mean, we caught it from both sides, right? For that. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to judge a person based on their political choices. In fact, it doesn't even matter to me who you voted for in the last election. What matters now is what are we going to do together? Once we've agreed that change needs to happen, how can we figure that out together? What are the values that we share that can enable us to do something together in our community, in our city, in our town, on our block, that will benefit others? That's how it starts.
That's true.
How it starts, Paul. And so wherever you are now, it's not too late for you to start. Now is the perfect time. But the challenge that I want to offer is that we're going to survive Trump. We're going to survive. Now, I don't know what we're going to look like once we survive him, right? In full honesty and fairness. We're going to survive him. The key is going to be, how do we continue activating after Trump is gone, right? Because there'll still be work that needs to be done. There's still progress to be made beyond this social order that we currently exist in now. And that's where I think the bonds, the rapport, the trust, the communities that we have an opportunity to establish now are so important. Wow. It's not only now so we can hold each other and survive, it's so that we can do the next thing together once we're through this and survived and ready to push for the next thing.
Thank you. You know what, I got to tell you, I appreciate that comment, because I've been really struggling with that mindset of, you voted for the red team, and I hope you get everything you voted for. That's kind of the mantra.
And, yeah, you can't be blamed for that. I mean, you can't be blamed for that, Paul.
No. And you're right. I absolutely have to really humble myself, and I have to say, you know what? You've seen the light. You've opened your eyes. Welcome aboard. And I go on TikTok all the time, and I don't see it really so much anymore. But I would see so many times Chicano Latino people would say, "Oh, we don't want to unite with the black," and the black people would say, "We don't want to unite with the Latino people because they voted here, or because they did this, or because we don't want men because they're here, and we don't want." And you know what? It's engineered to be this way. This is by design. And we're being manipulated. I don't know. I just lost my back screen here. That's okay. I'll just talk to you here. We need to absolutely absorb, embrace, and celebrate anyone who comes on board with this, because every voice is needed. And especially now, I'm thinking about what you just said, getting those voices that were pro-Trump now to realize what Trump is doing to them, realize they've been manipulated, to realize that they have been used as pawns in this game. They're going to come back with a vengeance, and they're going to be maybe the most astute and most committed people against this this atrocity.
Right on. And I want to qualify something I said though too, Paul, is I'm picking up what you're laying down, but I also want to be cautious that I'm not encouraging a person to like try to force their way into a conversation with someone who is absolutely pro-Trump, who's a bigot in for lack of a better word, right? Like what I am advocating for though is that when you see the opportunity, when you see light in someone that might enable you to have a conversation,
Yeah.
engage in that, lean into that, right? Like it sounds like there's something happening in your community with someone nearby. Like I'm not telling you, hey, let's shake and make up and like I'm not suggesting that. You have to protect yourself, Paul. But when people realize, when there's a ray of sunshine, when someone is stricken by an epiphany of some kind,
Mm-hmm.
we can't say, see, I told you so. We have to say, right on, like, let's figure this out. Tell me how you arrived at this. What have you learned? Tell me what I need to understand about your journey, about your new understanding, right? Like, it can't be, like, I've heard Democrats say, well, since Trump won, I hope all the Muslims in Dearborn, Michigan, I hope they all get deported,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or like, I hope Trump bombs the hell out of Gaza because they didn't vote for Kamala Harris or they stood up to Kamala Harris. So now I hope Trump allows the IDF to ravage the Palestinians, right? Like that can't be the
mentality.
That can't be the ideology. That can't be the spirit of things. But that when people say that, it tells you that they're not actually interested in progress. They're simply interested in winning a political battle.
Yes.
And there's a difference between winning a political battle and us thriving and liberating ourselves together. That's a differentiation between
great point.
that I want to try to illustrate here. But I'm not telling the average person listening, go out and try to make friends with the bigot that, like has attacked you or attacks other people or that you're frightened of because of the way that they behaved in the past. I'm saying that when you see light in another person, engage and lean in and see what kind of opportunity there is for cooperation or solidarity.
Great point. Yes, excellent point. I want to talk on the topic of meritocracy. I first heard that term about 7 or 8 years ago. There was a book. It was called Extreme Ownership, and I don't remember I'm not going to give the author credit for his title or the name of the book, but I read the book and I was reading about this term that they called meritocracy, and I read it and I said, this is bullshit. I don't buy into this. I'm sorry. And then DUI Pete Hegseth came on board, and we heard that guy wasn't even qualified to run a Denny's restaurant. And he's there touting his merits, and here we are saying meritocracy. And then we find out that he's removing all of the credentials of war heroes that are of color, black and brown men and women. And all I could take from that is that, well, meritocracy cannot be achieved unless we remove the merits of those who have heard merits before this. And so the real synonymous word to meritocracy, from my experience and observation, is nepotism. Nepotism. By the way, I got a new name for Pete Hegseth, and it's Whiskey Leaks. I thought that was a very appropriate name for him.
I love that.
Yeah.
And you bringing up meritocracy is fantastic, Paul, because the notion of meritocracy never existed in this country. Never existed in this country. It is simply a code word for white male mediocrity. That's all that it is.
Absolutely.
All that it is. And people who look like me are incredibly frightened of having to compete with people whom they know are every bit their equal, if not more qualified to hold the positions that they hold. So people that look like me, we are scared out of our minds about the notion of competing on a fair playing field with anyone who looks different, whether it's women, whether it's black women, whether it's black men, whether it's Latino men and women. It does not matter, right? It is something that we are absolutely frightened of, And to your point, Paul, there's never been a meritocracy in this country. Right?
Never has.
It's all been, this whole thing has been created to enrich wealthy white men.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is what Trump and them are trying to take us back to.
Yep.
Right? So they want to erode the liberal social order. They want to eliminate any possibility of progress beyond the liberal social order to something even more humane or just than what we currently have. They want to take us back to feudalism, to authoritarianism, to monarchy, right? Monarchy is the absolute opposite of what meritocracy claims to be, right? So I agree with you completely. And DEI, I mean, DEI, we know, like, when done well, can be really effective. But I know, and I'm guessing you know as well, lots and lots of DEI is crap. It doesn't work the way it's supposed to. The people leading the programs and the efforts don't actually understand what DEI is about, and so it ultimately fails. DEI, though, it's just a stopgap, right? It's something to try to prevent white male supremacy in the professional workplace, in public spaces, and so forth.
Yes.
It's when done well, it can be effective, but DEI itself, there's still something beyond DEI that we need to get to if we're serious about true liberation, true equality, true justice in this country. And the fact that they rail against that DEI, which itself is already inadequate, right? Mm-hmm. The fact that they rail against that is evidence of what it is that they're trying to create in this country.
Absolutely. You know, I've actually stopped using the word DEI, the term DEI, and I use the long form. This is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Simply because if you give the opposite meaning of each one of those words, it's very clear what their objectives are. You know,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I also believe that they fear nothing more than an equal playing field. Because when you have a level playing field, guess what? You're going to have not just fair competition, but you're going to have more productivity. You're going to have an outcome that serves the masses, not just a small percentage of them. And so, you know, the implementation of things like affirmative action, and, you know, I was a valuing diversity instructor back in the 90s. And so I got to understand what CRT was long before it was a term, you know, and we understood about racism and the dynamics of the outcomes and how it really affects masses, not just women, but people of color. And, you know, there's all kinds of isms that are specific to each one of those issues. And when we have a level playing field and we have a diverse group of participants, the outcome is always better.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Paul. And the evidence that MAGA don't want a level playing field is the history of this country.
Absolutely.
Right? It's the history of this country and the way that people of that ideology have behaved and orchestrated things from the very beginning. The only reason that we can even debate right now what all men are created equal means, the only reason that it can be debated today what that means is because of people of color in this country. It's because of poor people organizing. It's because of black freedom fighters. It's because of Hispanic freedom fighters. It's because of women advocating for their rights. That is the only reason we can say or even argue that all men are created equal means something different than it meant in 1776 when it was penned on the Declaration of Independence. It isn't because of powerful, wealthy white men. We have been the impediment. We, meaning white men, have been the impediment. We have been the obstacle for too long, and so what we're dealing with now is simply a continuation of the same folks who in 1776 wanted to say, well, no, we shouldn't be. Let's not revolt. Let's not fight against the English crown. What's better than what we've got here under England, right? Like half of the country was against rebelling against England, right?
Yeah.
And those are the same people that didn't want to put pen on paper that said all men are created equal. Even then when it did mean white men. There were some people that were totally against the idea of democracy, right? And that same reactionary force is what we're fighting against today.
Dang, that's profound. And you know, and it's a very, I mean, that's a simplification of a complex issue, but it's so true. So many of these people have the mentality of that imperialist society where there's two classes of people, and the odd thing about it is that so many people who support it are not of that upper class. You know, and I say, you know what, you're in the wrong tax bracket to be supporting Donald Trump. That guy don't care about you. I don't care what your gender or your race or your age or your military status. He's not your friend.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, exactly, Paul. And so that was the conversation that happened in the 1770s. But it was a group of one group of white men telling another group of white men, why are you propping up the king? He doesn't give a damn about you.
Yes.
Why are you protecting the monarchy? You didn't even elect this dude. You didn't vote for the laws that force you to pay these taxes.
Dang.
You can't even do business without him telling you what you can and can't do, right?
Including,
so there was one group of progressive white men, still racist, still bigots, still chauvinists, still misogynists, who were trying to have this conversation with this other group of guys that were like, no, we owe our allegiances to the king, and
yes.
don't deserve to vote. Not all white men deserve to vote because of this, that, and the third, and they weren't educated, and they don't own property, and this and that, right? We're still having the same conversation. We're having it in a more progressive way, and that is, again, only because of the organizing efforts of marginalized people. So Paul, when you and I talk about organizing and forming community, we mean that in every bit the revolutionary sense.
Absolutely.
Of progress that you know has moved this country forward over the past 250 years or so.
Man, guys, I hate to say it, our hour's about up. I'm just so honored to have you and Imari on this show, Isaac. I mean, guys, you've been watching the Weekend Boost. We've been talking to Isaac Casteles and Imari Dukes of 360 Collective, friends of mine from the other side of the country. And man, we've talked about a lot of things. And guys, we need to continue this conversation. I think I'd love to have you guys back again real soon, because this topic is something that needs to be continued. We didn't even get to talk about OSHA and all of the other organizations that have been under attack and the critical need for them. You know, I always end my show with this statement: everybody's looking for a hero. If you can't find one, be one. You know, I got this little plaque the other day. This is what you gotta do, man. You gotta be your own damn hero. Stand up, make your voices heard. We need 11 people on board with this. Guys, thank you for joining us. You've been watching the Weekend Boost. I'm your host, Paul Lane. Everybody's looking for a hero, and if you can't find one, look at this, man. These guys are heroes, standing up, making a change, and it's up to you to be that change, guys. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.